The Sakhir Grand Prix run on a 3.5 kilometre outer loop of the original Bahrain circuit. What a Grand Prix it proved to be, absolute thriller. George Russell starred, Sergio Perez won. How on earth did that happen? Let's have a look. So the start of the race then, and Russell's on the inside of Bottas. He'd done a good job in qualifying, but Bottas had edged him out by just over a couple of hundredths. Russell, though, gets a really good start from the dirty side of the grid. If we watch on board with him, for the first part of the start, there is nothing in it between the two Mercedes. The clutch drop is pretty much identical. The throttle application very good for both, and they're getting away extremely evenly. Then, suddenly, Bottas slows. Basically, Russell just getting the better drive, end of first gear into second gear, and he's now clean up the inside. He doesn't really give Bottas a choice here. This is clean, but kind of ruthless driving from Russell. He covers off the attack of Bottas at turn one, uses all the road on the exit. Bottas is nowhere near alongside to be taking advantage of that anyway. And he's through into the lead. Let's have a look at how this looked from Bottas then. Just right at the end of first gear, you can just hear the revs just spike up momentarily before he shifts up into second, and then he keeps that wheel spin all the way through second gear as well. So possibly for Bottas, it's just a little bit too much aggression right on the end of the throttle, desperate to get on the power, knowing that there's Russell there on the inside. Possibly a little bit of pressure, knowing how important this race start would be against a teammate that's had a very good weekend already and is having his first weekend in the car. But Russell was theoretically on the worst side of the grid as well. Then tries to fight back, nothing doing, and look into turn two, another huge snap of wheel spin. Again, maybe just a little bit aggressive on the throttle for Bottas. The track was very, very dusty. The wind was up on Sunday and it had blown a bit of sand across the track. And Bottas really was the big loser in the first couple of corners by first of all losing the lead, then nearly losing out even more behind. The best start of all probably came from Max Verstappen, starting third on the soft tyre compared to the Mercedes on the mediums. And he's got a better start than Russell, but then nowhere to go as Bottas just doesn't accelerate through second gear. Verstappen has nowhere to go there. He's actually just sandwiched between the two Mercedes and quite sensibly at this point backs out of it and fights for another day rather than try and wedge his Red Bull between a very narrow Mercedes gap. And then look how out of shape Bottas is. It's really fine driving by Verstappen just to measure this perfectly and not hit Bottas. And Perez as well, screaming down the outside. Now we flick to Charles Leclerc. Leclerc had a nice run through turn two, but lost the momentum when Bottas got out of shape. And now he's got a great view of Perez and Verstappen. If you look from the outside, you can see this very clearly. But also look behind. Daniel Ricciardo is attacking Leclerc. He's got a great slipstream on the Ferrari, and he's going to the outside of Leclerc. So Leclerc lunges it in deep on the brakes, partly to attack those ahead. Verstappen particularly braked a little bit early, again was quite cautious at the start of this Grand Prix. But maybe also Leclerc thinking attack is the best form of defence, and with Ricciardo on the outside, if Leclerc too was cautious, then Ricciardo may have just swung right around the outside of him and he'd lose a place. If I pause it there, just as Verstappen brakes and Leclerc's on the inside, you can barely see Sergio Perez on the outside. Perez is still side by side with Bottas, Verstappen's backed out of it. Then Perez probably will not be aware that Leclerc is even there. He's already side by side with Verstappen and Bottas. He's got plenty to think about, and Leclerc is pretty much perfectly blinded, not even just the angle, but with a Red Bull in between. He goes for it and then just simply, pause it there, locks up the right front. He can see Perez is coming across. Perez doesn't take the absolute apex. He gives a slight bit of space to anyone that might just have a nose on the inside, a bit like Kvyat did with Stroll at turn 8 last week. But Leclerc's just bombed it in too quick. He can't slow down the car. When he's got an armful of lock and he's still applying the brakes, the right front just locks solid. That makes the slowing down process even worse. And bam, careers into the side of Perez, into the left front against the right rear. Completely breaks Leclerc's suspension. And if we have another look at this moment of impact, it's pretty big. The left front of Leclerc whacking the right rear of Perez, that's our race winner. Sent around into a spin, and it was not through a tiny contact. It's a contact big enough to just break the front left suspension of Leclerc. Perez spins to the back and somehow regathers this one to get going again. It's a bit like how he did in Portimao when he had contact with Verstappen, but this contact is just a lot bigger. It's incredible that he even managed to get going with no damage, let alone come back and win the race. So the other big loser in it was Verstappen. And I feel a bit sorry for Verstappen in this moment because he's on the soft tyres, racing the Mercedes. He knows with Hamilton out of the race, this is a great chance for him to challenge for the win. He's still pushing for second in the championship. But as we come up to turn 4, again, super narrow gap, and Verstappen sensibly backs out of it. That allows Leclerc up the inside. And even then, he's very sensible. He goes very wide. He allows Leclerc all the space he needs to crash into Perez. In theory, that's a good thing when two cars ahead crash into each other and take themselves out. But for Verstappen, he then runs wide, the cars are washing to the outside, and crucially, he just tries to get on the throttle to try and not lose too much time, basically, as he's going wide. He's already going to lose places to Ricciardo and maybe more behind. But as he goes on the throttle, he gets on the concrete on the outside, and Verstappen, as soon as he gets off the track, onto the runoff, it's even more slippery, then touches the gravel, and that just lifts the car up a little bit. He's losing contact patch of the tyres, and he's straight in the wall. It's a crash that I'm sure will have caught him by surprise, because it looked, when he was avoiding action, like he had it all under control. He could see the accident, he was very safe on the brakes, but just no grip. And kind of like a Hülkenberg crash at Hockenheim last year, where it looked like it was going to be a nothing, and then no grip, ended in the wall. Okay, there's more grip than that slippery drag strip in Hockenheim, but it's a similar situation for Verstappen. Suddenly, he's pitched into the wall, and he's out of the race. So this one was a crash absolutely on Leclerc's fault, and the stewards afterwards gave him a 3-place grid drop for Abu Dhabi. They agreed. And I have to say, it's not the first time that Leclerc's been very, very aggressive and even over-aggressive on the first laps. Sebastian Vettel had a claim that Leclerc was driving too aggressively at the restart last weekend.
Up again, I mean, you can't just do that as if I wasn't there. It's the same as Austria, seriously. This time I should have crashed. Maybe it was the better option.
So let's have a little look at this one. This didn't get fully investigated with everything else that was going on in the Grand Prix. But Leclerc then, on the inside, if I pause it before the braking zone, he's miles away from his teammate. But he does go a little bit deeper. Vettel basically just gives him a load of space here. And Leclerc is clean up the inside, absolutely hugs the apex. Vettel's not really there. He's not really covered it. He's got space to go around the outside. In this occasion, I think Leclerc is okay because he's not out of control. The difference was with the Perez crash, he's steaming in, he's locked up, and he's nowhere near the apex. He's going to wash right to the outside of the track if he can even stay on the track. But in this occasion, last week with Vettel, it's a much more comfortable move for Leclerc. He's in control of the car, there's no lockup. He's able to stop the car dead on the apex, and when he's given the space that he's given on the way into the corner, he just says thank you, opens it up and takes the place on the exit. Of course, Vettel does have previous, because Leclerc did the more aggressive one already in the Styrian Grand Prix round 2, where he lunged up the inside. That one was more like the Perez one, and there he wiped out both Ferraris. He's been an absolute standout driver this year, Leclerc. His qualifying lap was brilliant already on Saturday to get the Ferrari back onto the second row when Vettel was out in Q2. He's been phenomenal, but maybe he needs to just be a little bit safer in these early laps, because once again he's caused a collision here, and he takes a 3-place grid penalty to Abu Dhabi, which could cost him. So that was a look into the crash between Leclerc and Perez, which ultimately ruled out Verstappen as well. But for more analysis on what went wrong with Mercedes and a masterful drive for Sergio Perez, check it out on F1 TV.